Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this. I'm Richard, and welcome to Absolem Solutions. This week's video, we're going to be looking at neuroscience hacks. Now, I am all about communication, technology, and teaching. If you've seen my last video, and there's no small amount of motivation in there, I hope for you guys anyway. What we're going to be talking about today, overall, I say neuroscience hacks, these are all about the brain's natural tendency to optimize and streamline all processes. Your brain doesn't like to work harder than it has to. It's designed that way. So let's talk a little more about how that works. Now, in the first video, I talked about the rule of threes in terms of 3 times establishes a pattern. That's totally true. 3 times establishes a pattern. And I talk about the more times you can reaffirm that pattern, the better. Take a field. You get a little bit of rain. No, not a little bit of rain. You get a lot of rain. The water is going to form a path. It's going to form a path based on the path of least resistance. And that's great. What does that mean for us? Well, the path of least resistance the water takes forms a groove eventually. And water can come in from several sources, and they're going to form a groove. And the more the water rushes through, the deeper the groove becomes, the deeper the path. And if the water keeps coming, eventually it forms a brook or a stream or a river, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's kind of how our synaptic channels work. The more we reinforce a pattern, the more we make that particular route of associations carve that channel a little bit deeper. And the deeper that channel forms, the more it makes that association or that recall incredibly easy. It really deepens that particular route, so that really gets ingrained in there. So it's all about repetition. It's all about building that flow, building up so that when you establish that pattern and keep supporting that pattern and reaffirming that pattern, it's going to make that synaptic pathway a lot more lit up. It's going to deepen that groove. That's where we want to be at. All right. There's this interesting experiment that they did with scuba divers, where actually they did a few experiments kind of similar, but they did this one experiment with divers where they took a group of divers, they split this big group into 2, and they had them learn a series of random words. But one of them did it on dry land. The other one donned their gear and learned the words underwater. In a training pool, but underwater. When they go to test these guys, and they test them on dry land, would you be surprised to find out that the people who learned the words on dry land did better? Well, kind of seems like a no-brainer, right? But the difference is they redid the test again in the training pool, with all of them in the training pool. And the people who did the practice or learned it in the training pool did better when they were underwater. The same has been done with a large group of students and a little bit of alcohol. They found that when the students who were slightly tipsy learned slightly tipsy, they tested better when they were slightly tipsy. And the people who were straight up sober did better when they were tested straight up sober versus when they had a little bit to drink. This can be used practically by allowing yourself to remember things by a series of states that you normally would use. Something, if you're in the office and you learn a series of passwords in the office, you're going to remember them more easily in the office, right? When you're at home and you're like, oh, what was that password? well, you're not in the office. And that's not to say you can't remember it at all. It depends on how deep that groove runs, on how that synaptic pathway has been made. But you're going to have an easier time while you're at the office, or, and this is crazy important, or while you're visualizing yourself in the office. Another way to dig this synaptic pathway a lot deeper is by talking about intensity. The intensity with which you have a memory or you build a memory or a pattern will influence its value, or how much you value that information. If you went out of your way to get that information, it's going to be more valuable to you. Of course, you had to work at it. And so that information becomes higher value, it becomes higher intensity, and it's easier to remember. Now, this is one of the weirdest and coolest neuroscience hacks ever. If you have a memory that you really don't like the emotional state that you were in when you learned it, if you learned it in a really, maybe it was just a really bad day, everything was going wrong that day. I mean, everything was going wrong that day. It was just a terrible day. You can strip out a lot of the emotional connotation of a memory by playing it backwards in your mind. Seems strange, doesn't it? When you, and it takes a lot of effort to do this, by the way, when you play the memory backwards, you have to rewrite the synaptic pathway in a new way. You replay that memory. You keep all of the knowledge because you're reconstructing it. Strip out a lot of the emotional ties or emotional associations. So that's really, really interesting. It's a kind of a cool hack. And I just wanted you guys to know that one. And it seems strange, but if you want to keep the knowledge and strip out that I wasn't feeling good that day, that's a cool way to do it. Now you'll notice that earlier in the video, I tied back to the rule of threes. Now I'm going to tie back to the rule of threes quite a bit, actually. But this, again, is another principle of how do you deepen those grooves? How do you build those synaptic pathways? Again, all about the synaptic channels or the synaptic pathways for those memories. Tie it back to another concept, and the more you root one concept, the more you can root the other. So you can tie concepts together. The more you can tie concepts together, the more it forms a form of mesh network of memories, and that is a neural net. And that is basically what your brain is. It's a neural net. So great way to tie back, and especially if you tie into concepts that people already know. Somebody who's passionate about cars, for example, if you tie what you're talking about back into something that they're interested in, that's going to make a huge difference for them. And it's really, really going to tie in really nicely for them. It's going to be something that's easier for them to remember because they're tying it into something that they're already interested in, they know very well. So that's something I can't emphasize the importance of enough. It's fantastic to do. Your native language is something that you don't need, generally, to sound words out, to take a lot of time to figure out the concepts. When you learn something new, it starts as a low-level process. You need to work up your momentum to it. You need to keep building your momentum. You need to keep building those synaptic pathways so that you know exactly what you're doing and that you're more confident at it. And the more confidence you build at it, the more it becomes high level. And you become very high level, for example, with walking, with talking, with reading your primary language. You notice that you don't have to go through and interpret every word and start. You don't need to read it word for word. You can look at a sentence and go, your brain recognizes it by pattern. It goes, yep, know that word, know that word, know that word, know all of these words. Yep, I've seen this kind of phrase before. If it's an idiom or something that's common, got it right away. You don't really need to work through it at all. It's a high-level process. Now, where that also kind of comes in is your default mode network, or DMN. This is your brain's autopilot. Your default mode network is your brain's way of taking it down a notch, and so that you're not remembering every single instance of everything of every day you couldn't possibly. You'll go crazy. And let's be honest, a lot of stuff we don't want or need to remember. The daily commute that went the same as the daily commute yesterday and the daily commute the day before and the daily commute. Our brain filters most of that out unless something special happens. That's why the rule of threes. 3 seconds to get their attention. Get their attention. Break that cycle. Do something unexpected. Raise the volume of your voice. Get a snap going. Build the excitement. Ask a question. Whatever you do to bring that up again and bring people out of the default mode network is great, because then you've got 30 seconds. 30 seconds to bring in your point. If it's something they really don't want to hear, if it's really bad news and they really don't want to hear it, you've got 10 seconds. So you're gonna have to squeeze that in, that 10 seconds, because you have 10 seconds before they can raise an objection. But that's another thing. Again, high-level process versus low-level process. We can look at a photo and go, that's not a good photo. Or that's an amazing photo. The reason we do this so simply is because if the brain has to work hard at finding the subject of the photo, and this is why there are techniques for framing and composition, if your brain has to work hard to find the subject because there's too many things that could be the subject, it's not good. It means your brain has to kick into low gear and work at it. And it doesn't like doing that more than it has to. So the more you can keep things high gear, the better. A great photo, you know exactly what the subject is, and your eyes go straight to it. It's a no-brainer. That expression comes in. It's a no-brainer. Well, because you don't have to kick into low-level process. When you're training or when you're communicating, try and keep it high level. Now, that's not always possible, especially when you're teaching new things. When you're learning completely new processes or a new language, your brain is going to have to go low level, so it works hard to pick this information up. That's completely natural. So the best way to be kind is really to stick to the rule of threes and try and give people a chance by reducing the amount of load at any one time. Smaller load is good, so we definitely want to keep that in shorter bursts. Many shorter bursts is definitely a good thing, because if it goes on too long, you're going to have people who lose interest, or it's just going to be very taxing on them. So until it becomes high level, that's kind of where we're at. Information we have to work for. Information in which we have to switch to a low-level process is worth more. It's higher value, higher intensity. It's something that we've earned. Earned information via questions, via labs, hands-on, anything that we have taken in for ourselves, anything we've worked at is going to stick a lot better. Which is why I love spotting in questions or opening discussions during a lesson. I tend to do that because the more you work with the new information, the more you apply it, the more you associate it, the deeper that channel is going to get, the better the synaptic pathway, and the better the result in terms of learning. All right, this is kind of a bonus principle. Actually, it's kind of a 3-in-1, but really important. And I put it here because I can't emphasize this enough. What you do in your mind for your brain, neurologically, is as good as doing it in real life. Pushing weights or lifting weights in your mind will not build your muscle mass, but it will condition your mind to be used to it. Now, why do I mention that? Because mental rehearsal is almost as good as doing the real thing. In fact, as far as your brain is concerned, there is no difference. And your brain does something else that's really, really funny. Your brain automatically and instantaneously disregards negation. What do I mean? Let me prove it. Don't think of a pink hippopotamus. The second I give your brain an image, the second I give your brain a noun or a thought, no matter how many times I tell you don't, your brain does. There's no way around that. Your brain does that naturally. So when I say, it took me a while to break this habit, I don't disagree with you. Your brain is going to read that as I disagree with you. And that's important. That's big. That's huge. The last part of this trifecta is that language defines your state. Defines your state and defines state for others that you are talking to or that you are presenting to. And that colors the message. So if you have a lot of negations, then you're making the brain rehearse what is the complete opposite of the message you want. I'll never talk about an anti-war rally. I'd much rather talk about a peace rally. I don't talk about ending poverty. I talk about building wealth and building value. And I specify wealth versus success because the two are very mutually exclusive. We can't have one without the other. The brain will automatically do anything you tell it not to when you tell it not to. So tell it to do what you want instead of what you don't want. And that's going to make your message a whole lot more powerful. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it a lot. I hope you hit subscribe, hit the little bell. That'll tell you when we put up new videos, but we're putting them up every Friday, so that'll be good. And last but not least, if you want to know more, if you like what we're presenting, please reach out, contact us. We love it. We're very open to talking about your dreams, your goals, your vision. This is what we do. And helping you deliver your authentic message in a way that is truly you. So, hope to hear from you. Until next time, my name is Richard, and thanks for watching.